shy to ask you about it. I imagine you're in a situation where you can't say much.
Yeah, I mean, what I can say without going too into it is that this year has been full of the highest highs and the lowest lows of my life, and I see so many women around afraid to speak, especially right now, afraid to share their experiences, and fear is by design. It's what keeps us silent. But I also acknowledge that many people don't have the opportunity to speak, so I do feel fortunate that I've been able to. And it's the women who have had the ability to use their voice that's kept me strong and you know, helped me in my belief and my fight for the world to be safer for women and girls. It's a pretty simple thing, but you know, nothing.
Blake Lively didn't just walk into Seth Meyers' studio. She floated in like royalty wrapped in denial. A blinding white wedding gown, multiple outfit changes, and a trembling voice rehearsed to perfection. But beneath the chiffon and charm, the mask slipped. What we witnessed wasn't a comeback. It was the soft launch of a breakdown. For years, Blake cultivated a brand built on relatability and effortless glam. But now, that polish is starting to crack. And when you look past the glitter, what's left is a desperate media campaign stitched together with pre-approved quotes and crushed ice small talk. What happened on Seth Meyers' stage wasn't just awkward. It was calculated. A scripted pivot from controversy to control. But here's the twist. The internet didn't buy it. In fact, it's tearing it all down piece by piece. So, what really happened during that now infamous interview? And how did Blake go from America's fashion darling to the poster child for Hollywood PR manipulation? Let's start with the dress, because the unraveling began the second she walked in. April 2025, Blake Lively returns to Late Night with Seth Meyers. Not to talk, but to perform. She didn't wear a blazer, not even a cocktail dress. No. She showed up in a gown so oversized it nearly swallowed the set. White, flowing, regal. It looked more like a royal wedding than a talk show appearance. The chair couldn't even handle it. Seth had to joke about needing smaller guests. But no one was laughing once the performance started. Blake arrived as if she were at the Met Gala. Not an interview. And just minutes into the segment, she changed into an entirely new designer outfit. Not off camera, during the show. The message was clear. This wasn't a conversation. It was choreography. Then came the monologue. Soft voice. Shaky breath. Carefully worded lines about the highest highs and the lowest lows of her life. The kind of speech a publicist dreams about. Vague enough to seem deep, dramatic enough to feel real. But behind the soft lighting and motherhood metaphors was a woman dodging one thing: accountability. What she didn't say? That she'd just been subpoenaed in a legal dispute with Justin Baldoni. Because that would have ruined the aesthetic. But that's just the beginning. Because what came next took the spin machine into overdrive. Blake didn't just avoid the elephant in the room. She waltzed around it in designer heels. As the cameras rolled, she leaned into the role of a woman weathering emotional chaos. But listen closely, and you'll hear the script. "I see so many women afraid to speak," she said, voice trembling just enough to sound unscripted. It was the perfect mix of vulnerability and vagueness. No specifics, no hard truths, just emotion wrapped in implication. But the timing couldn't have been worse. Or maybe too perfect. Days before her tear-soaked TV moment, Blake had been subpoenaed by Baldoni's legal team. Not rumors, not gossip. Actual court orders demanding texts, emails, and receipts from behind the scenes of It Ends With Us. And instead of addressing it, she spun the narrative. She wasn't facing legal pressure. She was fighting a system that silences women. Except the silence wasn't coming from the world. It was coming from her. She weaponized relatability, spun motherhood into a shield, and leaned hard into a kind of empowerment that asked no questions and gave no answers. And to make sure her story hit every news cycle, her team didn't wait for the interview to air. They pre-released quotes to Page 6 and Daily Mail. That's not public reaction. That's public manipulation. And yet, the public saw through it. Because no matter how soft the lighting or expensive the dress, one truth became impossible to ignore. Before Blake even finished her first anecdote on Seth Meyers' couch, the internet was already flooded with glowing coverage. Headlines from Daily Mail, Page 6, and entertainment blogs lined up like dominoes. Blake gets vulnerable. A brave return to Late Night. Motherhood in the spotlight. The twist? None of these stories were based on viewer reactions. They were written before the interview ever aired. That's not media buzz. That's a choreographed press rollout. It wasn't subtle either. The quotes used in those pieces? Word for word from Blake's segment. No paraphrasing, No interpretation, just raw PR copy, fed directly into the algorithm like performance-enhancing clickbait. And once those puff pieces were live, Blake's team ran the playbook hard. Flood the internet, drown the dissent. Every outfit got a feature. Every line got a headline. Every appearance, from red carpet to podcast, became another opportunity to bury the actual story. SEO stuffing, TikTok clips, staged candids. It wasn't just a comeback tour. It was digital smokescreen warfare. But here's the miscalculation. Audiences aren't stupid. They could smell the desperation. You don't need a Hollywood insider to know when someone's trying too hard to be relatable, especially when the same woman claiming to speak for victims is also coordinating exclusive dress breakdowns with People magazine. And the moment people started asking questions, the distraction campaign kicked into its next gear. While Blake spun her victim narrative on late-night TV, Ryan Reynolds was busy playing his role. Not as a supportive husband, but as a distraction campaign in human form. Suddenly, the two of them were everywhere. Red carpets, talk shows, candid street photos that just happened to look like magazine covers. You couldn't open a social feed without their faces showing up like targeted ads in designer clothes. But here's the catch. None of it felt accidental. One moment, they're casually signing autographs in Soho. The next, they're all smiles at a surprise public appearance. And just in case the public missed the message, a poster for another simple favor, Blake's latest flop, conveniently appeared across the street from their luxury apartment. Subtlety has officially left the building. That wasn't a billboard. That was a monument to vanity, a daily reminder to the world, and maybe to Blake herself, that her name still holds weight, even if the performances are starting to crack. And just like that, their "We're Just Like You" brand turned into a full-blown media saturation assault. Ryan leaned into the goofball charm. Blake leaned into the glam. But together, they weren't doing damage control. They were smothering the timeline, gaslight the public, serve a look, rinse, repeat. But even the most polished press tour can't hold up when the audience starts asking the one question no PR team wants to hear. What are you hiding? And the answer? It's chilling. Literally. If Blake's PR strategy was to distract, then the Seth Meyers interview was its crown jewel. Or at least it was supposed to be. But instead of clarity, we got chaos wrapped in couture. The segment opened awkwardly and never recovered. Her massive gown didn't fit the chair. Seth joked about it. The audience laughed on cue. But beneath the surface, something felt off. And then it got worse. Instead of addressing the elephant in the room, the subpoena, the legal feud with Justin Baldoni, the public backlash, Seth pivoted to a conversation about ice. Literal frozen water. For 5 straight minutes, they discussed whether Blake's character had beef with ice, and whether she, personally, liked it. Her response? Singing a Frozen song like she was auditioning for a kindergarten talent show. Meanwhile, the internet was on fire with questions about the lawsuit. But in that studio, it was all giggles, scripted nostalgia, and motherly monologues. Blake steered the conversation toward her kids, claiming she had to be Disneyland every day for them. A strangely glamorous metaphor for someone currently under legal fire. And then came the whisper. As the segment ended, Blake leaned toward Seth and quietly said, "Thank you, thank you, thank you not once." 5 times. Not performative, not playful, desperate. As if she was thanking him for not asking a single real question. As if she knew this was all just theater. And he played his part perfectly. That moment said everything the interview didn't. This wasn't vulnerability. It was relief, not from trauma, but from scrutiny. And while Blake was trying to keep it all together under studio lights, outside that polished stage, the cracks were already spreading fast. While Blake was whispering thank yous and dodging questions in designer heels, the internet wasn't playing along. As her interview clips circulated, something unexpected happened. Audiences pushed back. Hard. It started with IMDb. Her latest film, Another Simple Favor, hit Amazon Prime and within hours was flooded with 1-star reviews. But these weren't critiques of cinematography or plot. They were protests, direct responses to Blake's interview, her PR spin, and the growing perception that she was using victimhood as a shield. It got so intense that IMDb started pulling reviews. Not moderating, removing. That's how bad it got. Viewers weren't just unimpressed. They were furious. TikTok lit up with stitched takedowns. Reddit threads broke down the Seth Meyers segment frame by frame. Twitter, YouTube, entertainment blogs. Every platform became a firestorm of frustration. Critics joined in. The Guardian said the film drags on and drops threads. The Seattle Times called it a mess. The Washington Post gave it 1 star. And underneath all that, a tidal wave of comments saying what no publicist could spin away. Blake wasn't being brave. She was being dishonest. The public wasn't mad at her acting. They were mad at her acting like a victim, while allegedly exaggerating claims and hijacking feminist language for personal gain. She didn't just lose control of the narrative, she lost the benefit of the doubt. And in response, she did what any overexposed celebrity with a crumbling image might do, changed outfits and showed up somewhere else. But the story wasn't going away, because now it wasn't just about one interview or one dress. It was about how far someone will go to protect a brand, even if it means rewriting the truth. Behind the couture and camera flashes lies something much darker: fear. And not the kind Blake alluded to on Seth Meyers, but the kind she and Ryan reportedly create. Multiple entertainment reporters have admitted, off the record, that they refuse to cover the Blake Lively controversy. Not because it's unclear, not because it's unconfirmed, but because it's too risky. One word out of place and you're staring down the barrel of a legal threat. The word that keeps surfacing? Litigious. Not complicated, not controversial. Litigious. That's Hollywood code for, say something we don't like and our lawyers will bury you in paperwork. One journalist even told Popcorn Planet's Andy Signore that producers backed out of funding a documentary on the case as soon as they learned it wouldn't frame Blake as a misunderstood icon. Think about that. Actual studios, with lawyers and budgets, too afraid to speak the truth unless it comes with a stamp of celebrity approval. And it's not just press. Streaming platforms have allegedly pulled content. Interviewers have softened questions. Even Seth Meyers, a seasoned host known for edgy takes, played it so safe you'd think he was auditioning for the role of guy who doesn't get sued. This isn't public image management. It's narrative control by force. And the chilling part? It's working. While critics and survivors speak out, the official headlines stay polished, the Instagram grids stay perfect, and the interviews stay soft. But the silence says more than any article could. It tells us that the empire of Blake and Ryan isn't just built on fame, it's built on fear. And as the walls close in, they're not answering questions. They're shutting down the people who dare to ask them. Blake didn't just sidestep accountability. She cloaked herself in empowerment. On Seth Meyers, she framed her silence as courage, her vagueness as protection. She claimed she was speaking for all the women too afraid to come forward. But when people actually listened to what she said, there was no revelation, no evidence, no truth bomb, just one carefully curated anecdote at the Time 100 gala. Her mother, allegedly almost killed by a coworker. Not a man, a coworker. Gender unspecified, leaving just enough room for the narrative to shift as needed. For some, it was a chilling reminder of trauma. For others, it felt like a new layer of fiction, designed to maintain the image of Blake as a brave, misunderstood woman fighting against invisible villains. And here's the issue. She wasn't just telling her story. She was positioning herself as the face of all survivors. But the details didn't line up. The accusations against Baldoni? Incredibly vague. At worst, he reportedly kissed her after she bit his lip, a moment even critics say sounds more like a Twilight fanfic than a serious abuse allegation. The response from real survivors? Outrage. Because when you use their pain to score press coverage, when you paint yourself as the voice of the voiceless without offering truth, courage, or clarity, you're not being brave. You're co-opting trauma for clout. You're turning survival into a costume. And survivors across platforms, from TikTok to Twitter, started calling it out. Not just the claims, but the entire persona. The gown, the crying, the quotes. It wasn't advocacy. It was performance art in the age of Instagram. And as more survivors spoke up, the narrative began to splinter. Blake didn't amplify their voices. She drowned them out with her own echo. While Blake was busy turning trauma into a fashion statement, Ryan Reynolds was doing what he does best, making himself the center of attention. Except this time, the timing was off. Way off. Right in the middle of Blake's legal storm, Ryan flew to LA to speak at Green Day's Hollywood Walk of Fame ceremony. Was he invited? No. Did he know the band personally? Barely. His connection? He used a Green Day song in Deadpool. That's it. And yet, he grabbed the mic and gave a speech longer than the band's own remarks. A pop culture photobomb wrapped in stand-up shtick. And that's the problem. The charm that once made Ryan everyone's favorite Hollywood jokester is starting to feel like a smokescreen, one that's being deployed every time Blake faces heat. Need to distract from the IMDb protest? Here's Ryan making dad jokes on Fallon. Need to soften headlines after a subpoena? Here's another red carpet handhold, another perfectly lit candid of him and Blake smiling in Central Park. But people are catching on. What used to feel spontaneous now feels strategic. The couple that once seemed effortlessly likable now looks like they're running a two-person influence machine. One plays the victim, the other plays the comic relief. And together, they manufacture just enough noise to keep the real story buried under designer gowns and punchlines. The worst part? It's working in Hollywood. The studios stay silent. The media walks on eggshells. But outside the bubble, the audience has seen too much. And no amount of matching outfits or memeable quips can cover up the fact that the empire is cracking, and both of them are standing on a fault line. For years, Blake Lively was Hollywood's golden girl, all effortless glam, curated charm, and a perfectly filtered fairy tale. Ryan was her witty counterpart, the lovable rogue who couldn't miss. Together, they were untouchable. But now, the illusion is shattering. The Seth Meyers interview didn't just expose Blake's PR tactics. It exposed how far she was willing to go to protect the brand. From flowing gowns to frozen metaphors, from whispered thank yous to weaponized motherhood, the entire appearance was less of a comeback and more of a cover-up. A pre-rehearsed monologue disguised as bravery. But the public isn't buying it anymore. What began as soft skepticism has turned into full-blown backlash. IMDb review bombs, TikTok takedowns, Reddit deep dives. Not just because people dislike Blake, but because they feel manipulated, used, spoken for. And as for Ryan, his antics no longer distract. They spotlight the desperation, the Green Day mic grab, the press tour saturation, the never-ending charm offensive. It's all part of the same failing strategy. Flood the media, smother the truth. But here's the thing about controlling the narrative. Once the audience realizes they're being fed a script, they start flipping the pages themselves. And right now, what they're reading isn't a redemption arc. It's a cautionary tale. Because no matter how white the gown, how bright the lights, or how carefully you control the press, you can't brand your way out of the truth. Not forever. And if this is what the public is seeing on the surface, just imagine what's lurking underneath.